Hey folks, it's Wednesday, so it's time for another Tinto Talks, and this week Johan's going to be talking about how the law system is going to work in EU5, or Project Caesar, as he still is calling it, his super secret game that we don't know what it is at all. And from what we can see in this dev diary, it looks like we're going to be able to have a very modular style government realm, however you want to call it. So you're going to be able to have different campaigns during the game and set out your realm kind of how you want to. There's obviously a lot of repercussions, benefits, negatives from all these different choices. But it does look like we're going to get a lot of control over how this looks, again, depending on where you're playing, which country you are, etc. But it does look good from what he shows so far in this dev diary. As always, this is our initial look at this system. He's just looking for some early feedback, and we will get a much deeper dev diary, probably after announcement of the game officially. But with that, let's just get straight into it. And as he starts here, they've obviously got a lot of experience in grand strategy games at Paradox, and Johan especially. And looking back at Victoria 2, EU3, all these different games, like how their law system worked and how they could change that for EU5 and make it a little bit more refined, a little bit more interesting maybe. And what they came to is that in EU5, they define a law as something that has two or more policies to choose from and where you can change that policy for a cost. They will go into the cost later on. Many laws have lots of unique policies that are available for certain tags, religions, cultures, and many other unique restrictions. So again, a simple base system, and then they're going to be able to add that flavor on depending on where you're playing. Currently, most countries start with 12 to 15 laws that they have policies on from the start, and there are roughly 40 more laws that appear during your campaign as you go through the ages of the game. And the ages of the game, that is actually going to be next week's Tinto Talks. That is something to look forward to. And the first screenshot we've got here is for the administrative law system. This has the admin system itself, de jure laws, legal code, and royal court customs. So they're the different laws there, and then within those, that's where you choose the policies. And that's where you specialize each one of these laws. So as you can see already, you can specialize your admin laws quite a bit. You've got these 4 laws, and then within those, the policies that you're choosing to match up to those. So we had something like this in EU4, but I think this is going to give us a little bit more control over many more areas of the game. And then as Johan mentioned previously, enacting a policy for a new law is merely a cost in gold. So the first time you have to choose one of these, it just costs gold. But then changing a policy is far more costly. At the base cost of 100 stability, it is rather costly. That is a lot. If you remember back, the stability is from minus 100 to plus 100. So even if you've maxed it out, you're going to go back to like equilibrium 0, depending on where your equilibrium is, but you're at the middle point basically in the best scenario of that. And while having high crown power reduces it, having low crown power, the opposite of that, would be very common in the early part of the game and would increase the cost further. So especially early game, it's going to be very hard to change these. From what it sounds like, once you've chosen them once, it's very hard to change them again to something else, which I think does make sense. And then as you progress through the game, as you get your crown power up, it kind of gets easier and easier. And I'm sure we'll get events and things like that that change it as well. I'd be surprised if we don't. So how do you pass a law without plunging your country into chaos? Call in the parliament and convince them to approve the law change. How this works, they're going to talk about in a later dev diary solely around parliaments, which I think they said is coming relatively soon. Now, how is it going to work before parliaments? Because the game spans such a long time, are we going to have like proper parliaments at the start, or is it going to be more like your council in a way has to approve them? Or if you have like absolute monarchy, I guess, do you just do them anyway? Is there some kind of modifier for that? I think there must be. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, but I don't think it's going to work in one way all the way through the span of the game. I'd be very surprised if that's the case from what we've seen in other systems. You've also got to take into account when you do this, that when you do change your policy, your previous one is ended immediately, but the new enacted policy actually takes a little bit of time to come into effect. So you are going to have to kind of bring that into your calculations of when you want to change it. It probably is going to be useful to change them, obviously, but you have got to think like, well, in the short term, I'm going to lose these benefits, but in the long term, it is better to have these other ones, so I am going to make the change. Depending on your admin efficiency, this could take several years, so you can lower that. You can make it come into effect quicker or longer if you're not very efficient. Not only countries have laws, many international organizations have laws as well. If you don't know what they are, there is a video on the channel covering, I think that was like Dev Diary 4 or 5, where they talked about those. That's things like the HRE, and other systems like that that kind of span other countries and kind of group them together in some ways, or alliances and things like that. It's kind of that system. Again, I've got a video explaining it all on the channel. While in some of these organizations, this is something that the leader, like the Emperor, the HRE, can enact on his own. In some, there are specific countries that can vote on a policy on if it is approved or not, and there are many options available. So again, this system is very flexible. We've seen that with all the systems really so far, where they can make it work in different scenarios, different systems. This works in HRE. It also works in just a lowly country as well, so you can see this around the game, and it is going to interact differently depending on where you're playing. They're going to go into more detail around that when they talk about specific international organizations, when we get the HRE, when we get the papacy, I imagine. Some of these different dev diaries that are going to focus specifically on those, and Johan has mentioned previously, they are coming, I think, later in the year, he said. He's got a lot more things he wants to talk about before he gets into very specific organizations. So what type of policies do they have in the law? It's not just the modifier stacking like you've seen in previous games, but they enable and disable mechanics. They can make your estate happy and unhappy, and they do have an impact on your societal values. And then they're going to go through a bunch of examples here. Now, from what you've seen there, it does sound like it's a vast difference from EU4, but it really isn't. Once you look at these options, you are going to see things that do look kind of similar to what we've seen in EU4 and other titles, but with a new spin on them, different outcomes and things like that. So as you can see here, this is the Levy Laws. 2% of peasants is a fair bit more than 20% of nobles. Obviously, the pools they're pulling from there are different. You can have a lot more peasants than nobles. But over time, this will have an effect on how your military is focused. I imagine if you pull more from nobles, I guess maybe it's more professional or something like that. They haven't talked about the warfare side of things much at all. But as you can see from the options here, you can have inclusive levies, you can have noble levies or peasant levies. And Johan does say, is this a good way to kill off the nobles? And I suppose it is. If you're having noble army, it is going to be pulling a lot of your nobles from your realm during war. And then if they all die, that does obviously lower how many nobles you have. It doesn't immediately replace them. People have got to promote themselves into those positions. So I guess if you're doing a campaign where you suddenly don't want the nobles around, I can't think of a government type that would want that. And you could do this, I guess, go to war, send this army in. If they all die, well, your nobles are gone. That's how it's going to work in EU5. So that could bring some interesting ways to play out your campaigns, I'm sure. But as you can see, this does affect different things. So the inclusive one, non-culture levy size, so you're getting more levies from your non-primary culture or your non-accepted cultures, I believe that means. Noble levies, obviously more nobles, as they said, but monthly progress to quality. I imagine that's talking about how good your army is in general. Peasant levies, monthly progress in quantity, plus 10. So actually, yeah, that does back that up, doesn't it? So the nobles one, it looks like it makes your army better. The peasant one looks like it makes it bigger. So, you know, force of numbers in that way. And then peasant levy size, plus 2%. As they were talking about. So you can see these different ways you can already specialize your army a little bit just from the levies themselves. Next, they're going to talk about naval doctrines, everyone's favorite part of Europa Universalis games. And while this was a concept in EU4, here it is in law with lots of different options depending on who you play as. So you can have fleet in being, naval maintenance reduction, free oarsmen, your galleys are more powerful, merchant navy, obviously around trade, merchant power from maritime plus 25%, trade range plus 10%, shipboarding allows you to capture other ships easier, and wooden wall, combat outside own coasts, plus 10%, and Johan saying that's the best one for England, obviously. And yeah, it does make sense. It is kind of themed towards that, I would imagine. But again, you can choose these depending on what you're getting up to. And if I understand correctly at the beginning, the first time you choose this, or I guess depending on which one you start with at the beginning of the game, I'm sure some of them won't have these. Obviously, if you're landlocked, probably you won't have this unlocked at the beginning of the game. But I guess once you do have a coastal area, maybe that is when you start to choose these, but you will be able to change these as you do progress through the game. So I guess if you start off being very trade focused, you could be merchant navy, and then you decide, okay, I'm going to expand and I need my fleet to be a little bit better. Maybe you would change it to wooden wall or one of the other ones, and kind of that will help you change how your realm is doing. But again, as they mentioned, the cost will be pretty expensive, but if you go to your parliament and say, look, we've had enough trade fun, let's go colonize, let's go fight somebody in these far lands with our ships, I'm sure they'll be like, yep, let's do it, let's change the law for cheaper, and then you can get on with whatever you're kind of turning your country into as you do play through your campaigns. And then moving on from that, your legal code has many different options depending on where you play, but as England, you definitely have an important choice to make. Civil law, common law, or traditional law. So civil law, monthly progress towards centralization, administrative efficiency, as we've already seen, that is going to help you enact other things quicker. It's going to have a lot of other benefits in the game as well. So that is kind of a nice general one, I suppose. Common law, estate satisfaction, equilibrium, plus 5%, just generally keeping your estates happier. Stability, investment costs, minus 10%. So for this one, if you are having to invest into your stability to raise it up, I presume that's what this is talking about. That is going to be cheaper to do as well. And then traditional law, monthly progress towards decentralization, plus 0.10, estate satisfaction equilibrium plus 2.5. So half as good as common law, but you do get that different bonus as well on top of that. So which one's better? We'll find out later on, I am sure. And then as I was talking about, this game obviously spans a long time in history. And as you get into the later parts of the game, press laws are something that you have to decide upon. So again, this is where I guess the first time you choose it, it just costs gold. And then if you do want to change it, that's where the stability comes in. So you can have censored press, monthly progress towards communalism, 0.10%. Max literacy, though, plus 5%. So that is going to help you in some areas, although also not help you in some areas, as we saw with the goods discussion about how if your realm has higher prices, but your people aren't smart enough, they don't realize that other nations are paying less, so that can help you. Free press is the second option. Monthly progress towards free subjects, 0.10. Monthly progress towards individualism, 0.10. The same really you're seeing on all of these with how much this actually changes. Crown power minus 10%, max literacy plus 10%. So again, free press, very good in most situations, I would think. Very bad in other ones, depending on what campaign you're playing out. State press only, so only the state says what's happening. Monthly progress towards serfdom, 0.10. Monthly progress towards communalism, 0.10, and crown power plus 20. So this is where you're really, telling your nation what's happening. I'm in charge. You're all serfs, actually, so why don't you just do as you're told? Don't be listening about all that freedom other people are talking about around the world. And that's going to be, again, useful in very different circumstances. And then some cool additions that kind of spin out from this. As you can see on the screen now, local newspaper. This is something the burghers might start building if you have free press, and this will allow them to build these in different towns and cities. So is this good? Is this bad? Well, as you can see, max literacy plus 10%. So if you stack that with the free press that already gives you plus 10%, that's plus 20% just from your laws, and then the burghers building this building type as well. So is that good? Is that bad? As Johan says, it can surely have no drawbacks. And then moving on from that, he's going to talk about religious laws, especially around your heir and succession. The first one is any religion, clergy state satisfaction equilibrium minus 50%. So yeah, the clergy not very happy if you can say, yeah, my heir can be any religion at all. It's up to him. He's having a good time. They're not going to be pleased around that. Tolerance of heretical beliefs plus 1. Tolerance of heathen beliefs plus 1. Your heir can be of any religion. Yes. So as we were just saying, he can be of any religion, and it actually helps with your tolerance level as well. Same religion, clergy estate equilibrium plus 5%. Tolerance of the true faith plus 1. And heir is same religion. Yes. So again, this is where they have to be the exact same religion. We'll get into the religious group one next. And then the clergy, they're like, yep, nice, he's going to be the same faith. That is good for us. And then the last one, as I was just saying, clergy estate minus 10%, stability investment cost minus 10% as well. So that's a good minus, that one. It makes it cheaper to do that. And then heir of the same religious group, yes. So that is the difference there. Same religion exactly would be like Catholicism and Catholicism. Same religious group, I imagine that is like Catholicism and Protestantism. I guess maybe that's a bad example of that, but you know what I mean. They're both Christian faiths. They're of the same group, even though they don't kind of see themselves as doing so. Someone can correct me in the comments down below. I'm not 100% sure how Protestantism works in that system. I believe it's still seen as like a heretical faith, but not a heathen faith, because it is still Christian, but it's obviously the enemy of Catholicism. Again, it gets all fun and confusing, doesn't it, when it comes to religion? Let's just move on from it, to be honest. And then speaking of heirs, the succession law mechanic is not technically a law. It uses another mechanic, primarily because they always want it to be valid and enforcing a country to always have one. This special law is very much depending on government type. So it is using the same kind of framework of system. But again, they want to force you into having one of these. That does make sense. If you had no succession law, it'd be crazy times, wouldn't it? So again, using the same system, but it's going to look slightly different. And there's obviously going to be different succession laws depending on where you're playing, what you've unlocked, what kind of government type you are, all those kind of things. And as you can see here, this is the Salic law. It's a type of succession law of a monarchy in which the ruler is always the oldest male child of the previous ruler. Female children can never inherit or transfer the right to the throne to their sons. We know how this works. We've all played these games. It does show the eligibility rules, though, through sibling of ruler, allow children, allow male. Current ruler is ignored, so I guess that's just to stop the current ruler appearing in the list. I'm not too sure about that entry, to be honest. Allowed estates, nobility, eligible characters, and then you get a bonus basically depending on these criteria. I guess this is to kind of force certain people to the top a little bit depending on what kind of options you choose. And then as you can see here, you've got the Duke of Valois, his son, I presume. And then I think Duke Charles II, I guess, is the brother to the top guy, and then his child below him. So I think that's how that's looking there. That's the first son, and then his son, and then the second son, and then his first son after that. So that is the line of succession. And then obviously, depending on who lives, that is who will succeed your king or queen. I was going to say your character, but as we know, that isn't the case. This is EU5. I guess maybe you could have parliaments when they get too powerful come to you and maybe try change it. Who knows? We'll find out much more about that in the future. But with that, that is the end of the Laws dev diary for this week. I think a lot of information there. Nothing too crazy, I don't think, but it is good to see how kind of, as I said at the beginning, very modular it looks like this system is going to be. You are going to be able to have different combinations depending on where you're playing, which country you are, which religion you are. All these kind of things are going to work in together to allow you to kind of specialize your realm as much as you can do whilst playing through the game. And then they do end here saying all of this is really moddable. Everything is 100% controlled through text files, so you can change how this system works entirely, pretty much, how the succession laws are going to work, how all these different other laws and policies are going to work as well. So I'm sure we're going to see some crazy mods in the future as we do with EU4. And then as I said at the very beginning of the video, next week they're going to talk about ages and institutions. And that is something they've hinted at for a couple of weeks. And that is true. They have said like this is coming relatively soon. So I think that's going to be very interesting to see the different ages in the game and then the institutions that are going to pop up as well during those ages. So that's going to be a really cool one. So if you've enjoyed today's video and if you're looking forward to that video, do hit that like button. That helps other people find the channel as well in the future. And if you are new here, please do subscribe to the channel. I'm covering Project Caesar, aka EU5, aka Europa Universalis, aka some other name it's going to have, up to official announcement, launch, and much more beyond that, because I'm super looking forward to this game. This is the game I'm most eager to play out of everything I have kind of noted down at the moment coming in the future in Grand Strategy Gaming. And then outside of this, I do the same kind of coverage for Crusader Kings, covering their dev diaries, news, discussion videos on systems, things like that, things you can look forward to in EU5 once we get more information. But on that note, we will leave it there for today, and I'll see you in the next one.